The crystalline towers of Viridian Prime reached toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Queen Ithsera stood alone in her private chamber, staring at the empty chair beside her throne. 15 cycles had passed since her daughter vanished. 15 cycles of searching, hoping, and slowly accepting that Princess Lisa was gone forever. The queen's skin shimmered with a dull blue light, a sign of her deep sadness among the Zalkari people. Her advisors had stopped mentioning the lost princess months ago. They spoke instead of choosing a new heir, of moving forward, of letting go. But a mother's heart does not follow political wisdom. Lisa had been on a diplomatic mission to the frontier worlds when her ship disappeared. No distress signal. No wreckage. No survivors. The entire escort fleet had searched for months, but the vastness of space kept its secrets. Some whispered that pirates had taken her. Others believed she died in a spatial anomaly. The queen no longer cared about the how or why. She only wanted her daughter back. The Zalkari Empire stretched across 40 star systems, a civilization of immense power and ancient knowledge. The Zalkari themselves were tall and elegant, with skin that glowed in different colors depending on their emotions. They could speak mind to mind, sharing thoughts and feelings without words. They saw themselves as the galaxy's natural leaders, superior to the younger species that struggled to master basic space travel. Humans were particularly amusing to the Zalkari. These short-lived creatures had barely left their home system when the Zalkari first encountered them. They fought wars over resources that could be synthesized. They aged and died before they could accumulate real wisdom. They relied on crude verbal language instead of proper telepathy. The Zalkari considered humans to be energetic but primitive, like clever children playing with tools they barely understood. Far from the gleaming towers of Viridian Prime, in a sector of space the Zalkari had long forgotten, Jake Morrison guided his cargo ship through an asteroid field. The wandering star was old, patched together with spare parts and stubbornness. She rattled and groaned, but she flew, and that was enough for Jake. He'd been flying solo for 3 years now, ever since he left the Earth Defense Force. The military had been his life for a decade. He'd believed in protecting humanity, in standing against threats in the brotherhood of his squad. Then one mission went wrong. A simple patrol turned into an ambush. Jake survived. His entire squad didn't. Command called it bad luck. Jake called it a failure of leadership and walked away. Now he hauled cargo between frontier colonies, asking no questions and keeping to himself. The Broken Rim was the perfect place for someone who wanted to disappear. No major governments, no military patrols, just independent stations and desperate people trying to survive on the galaxy's edge. Jake was reviewing his navigation charts when the ship's computer beeped. A distress beacon, weak and intermittent, coming from a nearby moon. He almost ignored it. Distress beacons in the Broken Rim were often traps set by pirates. But something about this signal felt different. It wasn't the standard emergency frequency. It was older, using a protocol he barely recognized. Against his better judgment, Jake altered course. The moon was a dead rock, airless and covered in impact craters. Sensors showed the wreckage of a ship half buried in the surface. The design was unfamiliar, definitely not human. Jake put on his pressure suit and took his sidearm. If this was a trap, he'd at least be ready. The wreckage was extensive. Whatever ship this had been, it had hit hard. Jake picked his way through twisted metal and shattered hull plates. His suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing symbols and writing he couldn't read. Then he saw her. She was huddled in what remained of an escape pod, a thin pressure field keeping her alive but failing fast. Even through his helmet, Jake could see she wasn't human. Her skin glowed with a faint amber light, and she was tall, easily 7 feet if she could stand. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow. Jake had seen plenty of alien species during his time in the Defense Force, but he'd never seen one like this. For a moment, he considered leaving. Getting involved with unknown aliens in the Broken Rim was a good way to end up dead, but he thought of his squad, of the people he'd failed to save, and he couldn't walk away. He carefully lifted her, surprised by how light she was despite her height. Her skin was warm to the touch, and up close he could see delicate patterns of light moving beneath the surface. Getting her back to his ship took 20 minutes of careful climbing. The Wandering Star's medical bay was basic, designed for human injuries, but Jake did what he could. He connected her to oxygen, started an IV with universal saline, and wrapped her in thermal blankets. For 3 days, she barely moved. Jake stayed in the medical bay, monitoring her vital signs and trying to identify her species. His ship's database had nothing. He sent a carefully worded query to a contact on a frontier station, describing her appearance without mentioning he had her aboard. The response came back within hours. She was Zalkari. His contact warned him to stay far away. The Zalkari Empire didn't take kindly to their people being held by other species, even for medical treatment. They would assume he'd kidnapped her or worse. Jake considered dumping her at the nearest station and running, but something stopped him. She was alone, hurt, and clearly running from something. He knew that feeling. On the 4th day, she opened her eyes. They were large and golden, filled with confusion and fear. She tried to sit up, but Jake gently pushed her back down. He spoke slowly, using simple words, though he had no idea if she understood. "You're safe. I found you on a moon. Your ship crashed. I'm trying to help." She stared at him for a long moment, then her hand moved to her head. Her expression showed pain and frustration. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. When she looked at him again, tears were forming in her golden eyes. Over the following days, Jake realized she had no memory. She couldn't tell him her name, where she came from, or what had happened to her ship. She became frustrated when she tried to remember, so Jake stopped pushing. He focused instead on helping her recover. She was weak at first, barely able to walk. Jake helped her move around the ship, building her strength. He showed her how to use the shower, how to work the food dispenser, how to operate the door controls. She learned quickly, watching everything with intense curiosity. Jake started calling her Lysa, after a friend from his squad who'd always been curious about everything. The name seemed to comfort her, giving her something to hold on to. She couldn't speak, at least not in any way Jake could understand, but she communicated through gestures and expressions. Her skin would glow brighter when she was happy, dimmer when she was sad or afraid. A week after he found her, Jake was working in the engine room when he felt something strange. It wasn't a sound or a sensation exactly, more like a thought that wasn't his own. A feeling of gratitude mixed with curiosity. He turned and found Lisa standing in the doorway, her hand extended toward him. Her eyes were focused, concentrated. "Can you hear me?" The words formed in his mind, not his ears. Jake nearly dropped his wrench. "How are you doing that?" Lisa's face showed surprise and the connection broke. She looked at her hand, then at Jake, then back at her hand. She tried again, and this time Jake felt the connection more clearly. It was like she was standing next to him and far away at the same time. "I don't know. This is how my people speak. But you shouldn't be able to hear me. Your kind can't do this, my kind," Jake asked both out loud and in his thoughts. "Humans, you can't use the mind voice. It should be impossible." But it wasn't impossible. Over the next few days, Jake and Lisa practiced. The telepathic connection was exhausting at first, giving Jake terrible headaches. But it grew easier. Lisa explained that among her people, such bonds were rare and only formed between those who shared deep trust. She had no idea why it was working with a human. Through their growing connection, Jake learned that Lisa's memories were slowly returning, but they came in fragments. She remembered a palace, a woman with a kind voice and a feeling of being hunted. She remembered running, hiding, and then nothing but pain and darkness. Jake told her about himself in return. About his time in the military, about losing his squad, about choosing to fly alone rather than risk caring about people again. Lisa listened without judgment, and through their bond, Jake felt her understanding and acceptance. 2 months after rescuing her, Jake's ship was ambushed near a refueling station. 3 vessels heavily armed, demanding he surrender his cargo. Jake's cargo hold was nearly empty except for basic supplies. They weren't after his goods. They were after Lisa. "We know you have the Zalkari female," a voice crackled over the comm. "Hand her over and you can leave unharmed." Jake looked at Lisa, who stood frozen in fear. Through their bond, he felt her terror. These weren't the first people to hunt her. She'd been running for a long time before he found her. Jake made a decision in that moment, one that surprised even himself. He'd spent 3 years avoiding attachments, refusing to care, keeping everyone at a distance. But this scared alien girl who trusted him, who'd somehow connected with him in a way he couldn't fully understand, had become important to him. He opened the comm channel. Not a chance. Then he pushed the Wandering Star's engines to their limit and ran. The Wandering Star shook violently as energy blasts struck her shields. Jake threw the ship into a hard turn. diving toward a nearby debris field. The 3 attack vessels pursued, their weapons more advanced and powerful than anything his old cargo hauler could match. But Jake had spent years flying through dangerous space. He knew that expensive ships often meant overconfident pilots. He threaded the needle between 2 massive chunks of dead station, rolling the ship at the last second to avoid a collision. One pursuer tried to follow and clipped its wing on the debris, spinning off course. The other 2 were more cautious, giving Jake precious seconds. Lisa stood in the cockpit doorway, gripping the frame to stay upright. Through their telepathic bond, Jake felt her fear but also her determination. She wasn't hiding. She wanted to help. "Can you sense them?" Jake asked, both aloud and through their connection. "Where they're going to be?" Lisa's eyes widened as she understood. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. Jake felt the strain it caused her, like she was lifting something heavy. Then suddenly he felt it too. A presence to his left, moving fast. He jerked the controls and a blast scorched past where they'd been a second before. "There," Lisa pointed right and Jake dove. Another blast missed by meters. Working together through their bond, they anticipated the attacker's movements. Jake's piloting skills combined with Lisa's developing precognition gave them an edge the hunters hadn't expected. After 20 minutes of desperate maneuvering, Jake managed to lose them in a sensor-dead zone created by old reactor debris. They jumped to hyperspace as soon as they cleared the interference, not stopping until they were 3 systems away. When the ship finally settled into normal space near a small mining colony, Jake collapsed in his pilot chair, exhausted. Lisa sank to the floor beside him. "Who were they?" Jake asked when he could breathe normally again. "I don't know." Lisa's thoughts carried frustration and fear. "But they're not the first. I remember being hunted before. Running, always running. Someone powerful wants me dead or captured. I just don't know why." Jake looked at her, seeing the exhaustion on her face, the dim glow of her skin indicating her fatigue. "We'll figure it out. But we need to be smarter. We need information." Over the following months, Jake and Lisa became a true team. They took legitimate cargo jobs to earn money and blend in, but Jake also started asking careful questions in the ports they visited. He learned that several groups were searching for a missing Zalkari female. The bounties were huge, enough to buy a small fleet. But the strangest part was that some of the hunters seemed to want her dead, while others wanted her alive and unharmed. Lisa's abilities continued to develop. She could sense danger minutes before it arrived, giving them time to leave ports before trouble found them. She discovered she could focus energy through her hands, using it to heal minor injuries. Once, when Jake cut his hand badly on a sharp piece of metal, Lisa placed her glowing hands over the wound. He felt warmth spread through his arm, and when she pulled away, the cut had closed, leaving only a faint scar. "How did you do that?" Jake asked, amazed. "I don't know. It just felt right." Lisa looked at her hands with wonder. "I think I knew how to do this before, but I'd forgotten." Jake taught Lisa about human culture during their long flights between systems. He showed her old movies and music from Earth, explained human history and customs, and shared stories from his childhood. Lisa was fascinated by humanity's stubborn nature, their refusal to give up even when situations seemed hopeless. "Your people have been in space for less than a century," she said one evening as they shared a meal. "You're so young as a species, and you've faced extinction threats multiple times. But you never surrendered. You just adapted and kept fighting." "We're too dumb to know when we're beaten," Jake joked, but Lisa shook her head. "No, you're too brave to let being beaten matter. There's a difference." Her skin glowed with warm amber light, a color Jake had learned meant she felt admiration or respect. In return, Lisa taught Jake about Zalkari culture. She described a society built on tradition and mental discipline, where telepathy allowed for deep understanding, but also meant privacy was constantly negotiated. The Zalkari valued wisdom gained through long life, which was why they looked down on shorter-lived species. How could humans who lived less than a century possibly understand the universe? "But you don't think that way," Jake observed. "You don't look down on me. I did before." "I think I did." Lisa's memories were still fragmented, but pieces kept returning. "I remember thinking humans were inferior, that they were like children. But you saved me when you didn't have to. You've protected me, taught me, and never asked for anything in return. You've shown me that wisdom isn't about how long you live. It's about what you learn and how you treat others." Their bond deepened in ways neither of them fully understood. Jake found he could sense Lisa's emotions without her trying to project them. When she was afraid, he felt it like a cold weight in his chest. When she was happy, warmth spread through him. Lisa experienced the same thing in reverse, feeling Jake's carefully hidden grief and loneliness, his guilt over his lost squad, and his growing protectiveness toward her. 6 months after the first attack, they were docked at a remote station when Lisa suddenly gasped. Her skin flashed bright white, a color Jake had never seen before. She grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. "I remember. Jake, I remember who I am." Through their bond, memories flooded into Jake's mind. A palace of crystal and light. A woman with a crown of stars calling her name, servants bowing as she passed. A title that carried weight and power. Princess Lisa, daughter of Queen Ithsera, heir to the Zalkari Empire. Jake sat down heavily. "Your royalty." I was on a diplomatic mission. The memories came faster now, overwhelming Lisa. We were near the frontier when the ship was attacked. Not by pirates, by our own people. My guards fought them, but there were too many. Someone put me in an escape pod. I remember launching, then an explosion, then nothing until I woke up on that moon. "Your own people tried to kill you?" Jake asked, shocked. "Not all of them, but someone with enough power to command a fleet." Lisa's skin shifted to a deep purple, indicating fear. "Someone who didn't want me to return home." "Then we don't go home," Jake said immediately. "We stay out here, stay hidden, stay safe." But Lisa shook her head. "My mother. Jake, my mother thinks I'm dead. 15 cycles, that's how long I've been missing. She's been grieving all this time." Tears ran down Lisa's face, glowing softly in the dim cabin. "I have to go back. I have to let her know I'm alive." Jake understood her pain, felt it through their bond like his own, but he also felt the fear, the certainty that returning to Viridian Prime meant walking into danger. "If we go back, whoever tried to kill you will try again. They've been hunting you all this time." "I know." Lisa met his eyes. "But I can't let my mother suffer anymore. I can't hide forever." They argued for hours, but Jake knew he'd already lost. He could feel Lisa's determination through their bond. She was going home with or without him, and Jake couldn't let her face that danger alone. "Fine," he finally said. "We go back, but we do it smart. We gather information first. We find out who's hunting you and why, and we go in ready for a fight." Lisa's skin brightened to a grateful gold. She hugged Jake tightly, something she'd learned from human customs and had grown to love. "Thank you. I know this is dangerous. I know you didn't sign up for any of this." Jake returned the hug, feeling the warmth of her skin through his shirt. "I signed up the moment I decided to land on that moon. We're in this together." Over the next 3 weeks, Jake used every contact he had to gather information about Viridian Prime. He learned that Queen Ithsera had been in mourning for years. The court was preparing to name a new heir, a distant cousin who had the support of the traditionalist faction. He also learned that several powerful nobles had gained influence during Lisa's absence, nobles who would lose that influence if the true heir returned. The picture became clear. Lisa's disappearance hadn't been an accident or the work of outside enemies. It had been a political assassination, arranged by members of her own government who wanted a different future for the Empire. "These nobles, they're the ones hunting you," Jake explained as they plotted their course to Viridian Prime. "Some of them want you dead to prevent your return. Others might want you alive to control you or use you as a puppet. Either way, showing up at the palace is going to be like throwing a grenade into a meeting." "I know," Lisa said quietly, "but I have to try. My mother deserves the truth. The Empire deserves the truth." "Then we do this my way," Jake said firmly. "We don't just fly in and hope for the best. We plan, we prepare, and we make sure you survive this." Lisa smiled, her skin glowing with warm amber light. "When did a cargo pilot become a military strategist?" "I used to be a Marine," Jake reminded her. "I know how to plan an operation. Trust me." Through their bond, Lisa sent a wave of absolute trust and affection. "With my life." As the wandering star jumped to hyperspace heading toward the heart of the Zalkari Empire, Jake checked his weapons and started reviewing defensive tactics. He'd protected Lisa for months by running and hiding. The wandering star dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Viridian Prime's system, and Jake immediately understood why the Zalkari considered themselves superior. Massive stations orbited the outer planets, each one large enough to hold 1 million inhabitants, Ships of elegant design moved between them in perfect coordination. Energy shields surrounded every major installation, shimmering like soap bubbles made of light. "It's beautiful," Jake admitted, though his tactical mind was already noting defensive positions and patrol patterns. Lisa stood beside him, her skin flickering through multiple colors as emotions warred within her. Joy at seeing home again, fear of what awaited them, sadness for all the lost time. Jake felt all of it through their bond and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We can still turn around," he offered quietly. "No." Lisa straightened her shoulders. "I'm home. Time to face whatever comes next." Within minutes, 3 Zalkari patrol ships surrounded them, weapons powered but not yet locked on. A voice spoke in the melodic Zalkari language, which Jake's ship computer translated into text on his screen. "Unidentified vessel, state your identity and purpose." Jake let Lisa handle the communication. She spoke in her native tongue, her voice carrying an authority he'd never heard before. "This is Princess Lisa Ithsera, daughter of Queen Ithsera, heir to the Zalkari Empire. I have returned home and request immediate audience with my mother." The silence that followed lasted so long Jake thought the transmission had been cut. Then chaos erupted on the comm channels, multiple voices speaking at once, all in rapid Zalkari. The patrol ships broke formation, and within seconds, a dozen more vessels appeared. "They don't believe you," Jake observed, watching the tactical display. "I know." Lisa's skin had turned a determined silver. "They think I'm an imposter or that a human has kidnapped a Zalkari and is trying to use her for some scheme." The patrol commander's voice cut through the chatter. "The individual claiming to be Princess Lisa will submit to immediate boarding and identification. The human pilot will be detained pending investigation." "Detained means arrested," Jake muttered. "Probably thrown in some cell while they figure out if I'm a hero or a criminal." Lisa looked at him, worry clear on her face. "I won't let them hurt you." "I know." Jake began powering down his weapon systems, showing compliance. "But we knew this part wouldn't be easy. Let's just get through it." The boarding party arrived in a ship that looked more like a work of art than a military vessel. 10 guards in ceremonial armor that glowed with soft blue light stepped aboard the Wandering Star. Their leader, a tall female with skin that pulsed with authority, studied Lisa with intense focus. "You claim to be the lost princess." It wasn't a question. The guard's telepathic sense touched Lisa's mind, and Jake felt Lisa allow the connection. The guard's eyes widened. "It's truly you." Within the hour, Jake found himself separated from Lisa and escorted to a detention facility. The cell was comfortable by prison standards, with a bed, basic amenities, and a window showing the palace grounds. But it was still a prison. Guards stood outside watching him with expressions that made their feelings clear. They saw a human who'd been traveling with their lost princess, and they assumed the worst. Jake sat on the bed and tried to reach Lisa through their bond. He felt her presence, distant but clear. She was overwhelmed by emotion, surrounded by people but alive and safe for now. He sent reassurance through the connection and felt her respond with gratitude and determination. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, Lisa stood in her mother's private chambers. Queen Ithsera had aged in the years since Lisa last saw her. The queen's skin, once brilliant with light, now glowed dimly. Lines of grief had etched themselves into her face. But when she saw her daughter, when she truly recognized Lisa, the queen's skin blazed with joy. "My daughter, my precious daughter." The queen pulled Lisa into an embrace, and both of them wept. "I thought you were dead. All these years I thought you were gone forever. I'm sorry, mother. I'm so sorry." Lisa clung to her mother, feeling the depth of grief the queen had carried. "I tried to come back sooner, but I couldn't remember. I was lost." They talked for hours, Lisa explaining everything she could remember. The attack on her ship, waking on the barren moon with no memory, Jake finding her and caring for her when he had no reason to do so, the months they'd spent together, running from hunters while she slowly regained her memories. The queen listened to everything, her emotions shifting through the conversation. Relief at having her daughter back, rage at those who'd tried to kill her, confusion about the human who'd saved her, and concern about what came next. "The court is divided, my daughter." The queen's skin turned a troubled purple. "Many of the nobles believe you're dead. They've already chosen your cousin Velkor as my heir. He's gained much support from the traditionalists, those who want to keep our empire isolated and superior. And if I return, Lysa asked, though she already knew the answer. It will cause chaos. Those who supported Velcor will see you as a threat. They'll question your fitness to rule, especially now that you've bonded with a human. The queen saw Lysa's skin flash defensive gold. I'm not judging you, child. I want to understand. How did this happen? Humans cannot form telepathic bonds with our people. Lysa explained about Jake, about how he'd saved her when he had nothing to gain from it, how he'd protected her, taught her and never asked for anything in return, how their bond had formed naturally, built on trust and shared experiences. She explained that Jake had shown her things about humanity that she'd never understood before. Their resilience, their refusal to give up, their ability to adapt and overcome. He sounds remarkable, the queen admitted, but the court will not see it that way. They'll see a human who's contaminated the air with inferior ideas. They'll use your bond as proof that you're unfit to rule. Then they're fools. Lysa's skin flashed with anger. Jake taught me what real strength looks like. It's not about living for centuries or having telepathy. It's about getting back up when you're knocked down. It's about protecting those who matter, even when it's dangerous. He's worth 10 of those nobles. The queen studied her daughter carefully. You care for him deeply. He's my friend, my guardian, my bondmate. Lysa met her mother's eyes. And if the Empire cannot accept him, then perhaps I don't want to be its heir. The formal hearing was held 3 days later in the Grand Council chamber. Hundreds of nobles gathered, their skin glowing with various colors that reflected their emotions and allegiances. At the center of it all stood Lysa, wearing the formal robes of a princess but looking far different from the girl who'd left years ago. She'd survived things no royal should have to endure, and it showed in her bearing. Jake was brought from his cell, still in his worn cargo pilot clothes, looking completely out of place among the elegant Zelkari. He was made to stand in a marked area, surrounded by guards. Through their bond, Jake sent Lysa strength and support. She responded with determination. The questioning began. Noble after noble stood to challenge Lysa's return. They questioned her memories, her identity, her fitness to rule. But most of all, they questioned her relationship with Jake. You've bonded with a human, one elder noble said with disgust, a species barely capable of spaceflight. How can you lead our empire when you've lowered yourself to their level? Lysa's skin flashed brilliant white with rage, but she kept her voice calm. Commander Jake Morrison saved my life when he had no reason to do so. He protected me for months while I was hunted by people who should have been protecting me. He taught me things about courage and resilience that I never learned in this palace. If that's lowering myself, then I'm proud of it. Another noble stood. But the bond itself is impossible. Humans cannot use the mind voice. This human must have used some kind of technology to trick you, to control you. Test us then, Lysa challenged. Test our bond. See for yourself that it's real. The queen ordered it, and telepaths came forward to examine both Lysa and Jake. They were shocked to find the bond was genuine, deep and strong in ways that usually took decades to develop. But their findings only made some nobles more suspicious. They whispered about human manipulation, about technology they didn't understand, about contamination of the pure Zelkari bloodline. Finally, Velcor stood. Lysa's cousin was tall and handsome, with skin that glowed with confident blue light. He'd clearly expected to become the next ruler, and his resentment showed in the purple undertones beneath his glow. Princess Lysa, I'm relieved to see you alive. His voice carried false warmth. But surely you must see that your years away have changed you. You've been through trauma. You've bonded with an inferior species. These things have damaged you. For the good of the Empire, perhaps you should step aside and allow me to serve as heir. Damaged? Lysa's skin blazed brilliant gold. I survived an assassination attempt by my own people. I lived alone on a dead moon. I was hunted across a dozen systems. I formed a bond that should be impossible. And I made it home. If that's damage, cousin, then I wear it proudly. She turned to address the entire assembly, her voice carrying power and authority. I've seen things you haven't. I've lived among humans and other species you dismiss as inferior. I've learned that strength comes in many. Jake stood on the balcony of his assigned quarters, looking out over the crystalline city below. 3 weeks had passed since the formal hearing, and he still felt completely out of place. The room they'd given him was larger than his entire ship, decorated with materials he couldn't name and lit by light sources he didn't understand. Everything was beautiful and alien and wrong. He missed the wandering star. He missed the simple life of flying cargo routes and not being stared at everywhere he went. The Zalkari servants treated him with barely hidden disgust. Palace guards watched his every move. The nobles he passed in the corridors made their feelings clear through expressions that needed no translation. Through his bond with Lysa, Jake felt her struggling too. She was trying to relearn royal protocols she'd forgotten, attending endless meetings with advisors and dealing with a court that questioned her every decision. They saw each other only briefly each day, always with others present, always under watchful eyes. But Jake had another problem occupying his thoughts. His military instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong. Lysa had nearly died in 3 separate incidents since their return, and each one had been dismissed as an accident. The first happened during a tour of the palace gardens. A decorative statue had somehow fallen from its mounting, missing Lysa by inches. The guards had blamed old fasteners and poor maintenance. The second incident involved a meal served at a formal dinner. Lysa had felt something wrong through her empathic senses and refused to eat. Later tests showed the food contained a slow-acting poison that would have mimicked natural illness. The kitchen staff swore it was contamination, not sabotage. The third incident had been the most serious. A transport vehicle carrying Lysa to a diplomatic meeting suffered a complete system failure while flying over a deep gorge. Only her telepathic connection to Jake, which gave her a split-second warning, allowed her to activate emergency protocols before the crash. She'd survived with minor injuries. The investigation blamed a computer malfunction. Jake didn't believe in coincidences. 3 accidents in 3 weeks meant someone was still trying to kill Lysa, and they were inside the palace. He'd tried to convince the royal guard, but they'd dismissed his concerns. Humans didn't understand Zalkari technology or culture. He was seeing threats that didn't exist, so Jake started investigating on his own. He explored the palace at night when most people were resting. He watched patterns of movement, noting who had access to what areas. He studied the political landscape, learning which nobles supported Lysa and which supported Velcor. The information he gathered painted a disturbing picture. A faction of traditionalist nobles had been gaining power during Lysa's absence. They wanted to maintain the Zalkari Empire's isolationist policies and superiority over other species. Lysa's return threatened their plans, especially since she'd started advocating for opening relations with other civilizations. If she became queen, their entire political agenda would collapse. Jake was reviewing his notes late one night when Lysa appeared at his door. She looked exhausted, her skin glowing dimly. She'd used a private passage to reach his quarters without being seen. "I needed to see you," she said through their bond. "Away from all the others." Jake pulled her inside quickly. "You shouldn't be here. If someone sees you visiting a human's quarters at night, the rumors will be terrible." "I don't care about rumors." Lysa sank into a chair, her formal robes pooling around her. "Jake, I'm so tired. Every day it's meetings and arguments and people questioning everything I say. Half the court thinks I should step aside. The other half only supports me because my mother commands it." Jake sat beside her, taking her hand. Through their bond, he felt her exhaustion and frustration. "What does Velcor say?" "He's been perfectly polite." "Too polite." Lysa's skin flickered with suspicious orange. "He agrees with everything I suggest in public, then undermines it in private meetings. He's turning the traditionalists against me slowly, making it look like my ideas are dangerous or naive. He's smart." Jake squeezed her hand. "He can't openly oppose you without angering the queen, so he's playing the long game, waiting for you to fail or for something to happen that makes you look unfit to rule." "Something like dying in an accident," Lysa said quietly. "You think he's behind the attempts on my life. I think someone with power and resources wants you gone. Velcor has the most to gain from your death." Jake showed her his notes, the patterns he'd observed. "Look at this. All 3 accidents happened when specific guards were on duty. Those guards all have connections to nobles who support Velcor's faction, and each time the investigations were led by officials who oppose your reforms." Lysa studied the information, her skin shifting through colors as she processed it. "We need proof. Suspicions won't be enough to accuse the heir apparent of attempted murder. Then we get proof." Jake's expression turned grim. "But we have to be careful. If they know we're investigating, they might accelerate their plans." Over the following week, Jake and Lysa worked together secretly. Lysa used her royal access to review security records and personnel files. Jake used his outsider status to move through areas where Zalkari wouldn't expect surveillance, listening to conversations and watching for suspicious behavior. What they discovered was worse than they'd imagined. The conspiracy wasn't just about Velcor wanting the throne. It went back to Lisa's original disappearance. The attack on her diplomatic ship had been arranged by a coalition of traditionalist nobles who feared her progressive ideas. They'd wanted to install Velcor as heir, someone who would maintain the status quo. But the plot had failed when Lisa survived and went missing instead of dying cleanly. The conspirators had spent years searching for her, trying to finish what they'd started. Now that she'd returned, they were desperate to eliminate her before she could expose their crimes. Jake found evidence hidden in maintenance logs and communication records. Lisa used her telepathic abilities to sense deception in the people they questioned. Together, they built a case that showed the conspiracy reached into the highest levels of government. Ministers, military commanders, and several prominent nobles were all involved. "Your mother needs to see this," Jake said as they compiled their evidence. "The coronation is in 2 weeks. If we don't stop them before then, they'll make their move." Lisa's skin turned fearful purple. "The coronation. Jake, that's the perfect opportunity. My mother plans to formally reaffirm me as heir in front of the entire empire. If the conspirators are going to act, that's when they'll do it. Then we expose them first." Jake stood and paced, his tactical mind working through scenarios. "We present the evidence to the Queen, she arrests the conspirators, and you're safe." But Lisa shook her head. "It's not that simple. Some of these people have served for generations. They have loyal followers and private military forces. If we accuse them without absolute proof, they could claim we're manufacturing evidence to eliminate political opponents. It could start a civil war." Jake stopped pacing. "So what do? We catch them in the act." Lisa's skin shifted to determined silver. "We let them think their plan is working, and we prepare to counter it. When they move against me at the coronation, we'll be ready." "That's incredibly dangerous," Jake objected. "You're talking about using yourself as bait." "I know." Lisa met his eyes. "But it's the only way to expose them completely. If we can show the Empire that these nobles tried to assassinate the heir in front of everyone, their support will collapse. No one will be able to defend them." Jake wanted to argue, but he understood her logic. More than that, he felt her determination through their bond. She'd made up her mind, and nothing he said would change it. "Fine, but we do this smart." Jake started planning. "We need allies we can trust. People who can act quickly when things go wrong." They carefully approached members of the Royal Guard who'd shown loyalty to Lisa. Captain Kira, a veteran soldier who'd served Lisa's mother for decades, became their primary ally. She was shocked by the evidence they showed her but believed them. She quietly recruited a small group of absolutely loyal guards who would be ready to act during the coronation. Jake also reached out to the few Zalkari who'd shown him respect. A young engineer named Trell had been fascinated by Jake's stories about human technology and tactics. Several younger nobles who supported Lisa's progressive ideas agreed to watch for suspicious activity. It wasn't a large network, but it was loyal. The night before the coronation, Jake couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony again, watching the city lights and thinking about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. He felt Lisa's presence through their bond before she appeared beside him. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, but he didn't mean it. "I needed to see you before tomorrow." Lisa took his hand. "Jake, if something happens to me, you need to leave. Don't stay and try to save me. Promise me you'll get to safety." "Not a chance." Jake squeezed her hand. "We're in this together, remember? I didn't protect you for months just to abandon you now. You could die tomorrow. These conspirators won't hesitate to kill a human who gets in their way." "I know." Jake turned to face her fully. "But I'm not leaving you. That's not who I am, and you know it." The coronation hall was magnificent beyond anything Jake had ever imagined. Crystal pillars reached toward a dome ceiling that showed the stars above through some kind of transparent material. Thousands of Zalkari filled the space, their glowing skin creating a sea of shifting colors. Representatives from dozens of allied species occupied special galleries, including a small group of humans from the nearest Earth colony. Jake stood in his assigned position near the royal platform, wearing formal clothes that had been made specially for him. The outfit was a blend of human military dress and Zalkari ceremonial style, and he felt ridiculous in it. But Lisa had insisted through their bond that he looked handsome. so he endured the uncomfortable formality. Queen Ithsera sat on her throne, wearing a crown that seemed to be made of captured starlight. Lisa stood beside her mother, dressed in the traditional robes of an heir, her skin glowing with controlled calm despite the nervousness Jake felt through their bond. The ceremony began with ancient rituals and speeches in the Zalkari language. Jake's translator implant gave him a running commentary, but he was only half listening. His attention was focused on the crowd, on the guards positioned around the hall, on the subtle movements that might indicate trouble. Captain Kira and her loyal guards were spread throughout the hall, trying to look casual while remaining alert. Trell the engineer had positioned himself near the control systems for the hall's shields and security. Their small network of allies waited ready to act when needed. Jake spotted Velcor standing with the other high nobles. Lisa's cousin looked calm and respectful, but Jake noticed the tension in his posture. Several of the nobles they'd identified as conspirators stood near him, their skin colors carefully controlled to show appropriate ceremony. The queen began her formal speech, declaring her intention to reaffirm Lisa as her heir despite the years of absence. She spoke of Lisa's survival, her strength, and her growth during her time away. Many in the crowd glowed with approval. Others flickered with colors that indicated doubt or disapproval. "My daughter has returned to us changed," the queen said, her voice carrying through the hall with telepathic enhancement. "She has experienced things no royal should face. She has survived through courage and determination, and she has learned lessons about the galaxy that will serve our empire well." Lisa stepped forward to speak as tradition demanded. This was the moment Jake had been dreading. When Lisa spoke, she would announce her intention to open relations with other species, to end the Empire's isolationist policies, and to bring the Zalkari into greater cooperation with the galactic community. It was the trigger the conspirators had been waiting for. "My people," Lisa began, her voice steady despite her fear. "I stand before you today not just as a princess, but as someone who has lived among other species. I have seen their strengths and their wisdom. I have learned that we Zalkari, for all our power, do not have all the answers. The galaxy is changing and we must change with it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, many not. Lisa continued, speaking of cooperation, of learning from others, of humanity's resilience and adaptability. She spoke of Jake, of how a simple cargo pilot had shown her what true nobility meant. That's when Velcor made his move. He stepped forward, his skin flashing with righteous anger. "Enough. The Empire has heard enough of this human-influenced poison. Princess Lisa is clearly unfit to rule. She has been corrupted by inferior species and their primitive ideas." The hall erupted in chaos. Half the assembly shouted support for Velcor. The other half defended Lisa. The queen demanded silence, but her voice was lost in the uproar. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting strange shadows through the crystalline hall. Jake's military training kicked in instantly. He moved toward Lisa, but guards suddenly surrounded her. Not Captain Kira's loyal forces, but conspirators wearing Royal Guard uniforms. "The princess is in danger," one of them announced loudly. "We're escorting her to safety." Through their bond, Jake felt Lisa's spike of fear. These weren't protectors. They were assassins. "That's far enough," Jake called out, his hand moving to the weapon hidden under his formal jacket. He'd insisted on being armed, and now he was glad he'd fought that battle. The false guards turned toward him. "The human has no authority here. Stand aside." "Not happening." Jake raised his weapon, a compact human pistol that looked crude compared to Zalkari energy weapons, but would be just as deadly. "Lisa, get behind me," but Lisa didn't move. Instead, she stood tall, her skin blazing brilliant white with rage. "You dare? You dare threaten me in my mother's hall? Guards, arrest these traitors." Captain Kira and her loyal forces moved immediately, but they were outnumbered. The conspirators had planned well. Nearly a third of the guards in the hall were part of the plot, and they all moved at once. Energy weapons charged, shields activated. The coronation hall transformed into a battlefield. Jake grabbed Lisa and pulled her behind a crystal pillar as energy blasts tore through the space where she'd been standing. The human delegation screamed and dove for cover. Alien ambassadors scrambled toward exits. The Zalkari nobles scattered, some trying to fight, others fleeing. "We need to get you out of here," Jake said urgently. "No." Lisa's eyes glowed with determination. "This is exactly what we wanted. They're exposing themselves. We just need to survive long enough for everyone to see what they're doing. Velkor's voice boomed through the hall, amplified by telepathy. The princess and her human conspirator are attempting a coup. They've corrupted the royal guard. Loyal citizens, help us restore order. He's trying to spin this, Jake muttered, making us look like the bad guys. Lysa reached out with her telepathic abilities, broadcasting to everyone in the hall. This is the truth. Velkor and his allies tried to kill me 15 cycles ago. They've been hunting me ever since. They're trying to kill me now to prevent me from exposing their crimes. Through their bond, she shared memories with Jake, then projected those memories outward for all the telepathic Zalkari to see. The attack on her diplomatic ship, the conspirators planning her death, the years of hunting her, the recent assassination attempts, the evidence she and Jake had gathered. The effect was immediate and stunning. Thousands of Zalkari gasped as they received the telepathic broadcast. They saw the truth directly without words or interpretation. There was no way to deny it or spin it when the memories came straight from Lisa's mind. But the conspirators weren't finished. Velkor snarled in rage and drew his own weapon. If she won't die quietly, then she dies publicly. Kill them both! What followed was the most intense fight of Jake's life. He'd been in combat before, faced dangerous situations, but never anything like this. Energy weapons tore through crystal pillars. Loyal guards fought traitor guards. Nobles with combat training joined the battle on both sides. Jake fought with everything he'd learned in the military. He used cover effectively, made every shot count, and protected Lisa with absolute focus. His human weapons were less powerful than Zalkari energy rifles, but they were reliable and familiar. More importantly, Jake's tactical thinking and adaptability gave him an edge the conspirators hadn't expected. Lisa wasn't defenseless either. She used her abilities to sense attacks before they came, pulling Jake out of danger multiple times. She healed wounds as quickly as she could, her hands glowing with energy. And when a group of traitor guards tried to flank them, she unleashed a blast of pure telepathic force that dropped them to their knees in pain. The queen fought as well, revealing combat skills that showed why she'd earned her throne. Her skin blazed with power as she cut through the conspirators' forces. But there were too many of them, and they kept coming. Jake was reloading his weapon when he saw Velkor moving toward the queen with a charged energy blade. "Your Majesty, behind you!" But the warning came too late. Velkor's blade swept toward the queen's back. Time seemed to slow. Jake knew he couldn't reach her in time. Lysa screamed through their bond. Then Captain Kira was there, her shield taking the blow meant for the queen. The impact threw her across the hall, but she'd saved the queen's life. The queen turned on Velkor with fury beyond anything Jake had witnessed. She was a mother who'd lost her daughter for 15 years, a ruler betrayed by her own nobles, and she was done being merciful. Her skin blazed brilliant white, and power erupted from her in a wave that knocked everyone in the hall off their feet, except for those she consciously protected. When the light faded, Velkor and his closest allies were on their knees, unable to move. The queen's telepathic power held them frozen. "Enough," the queen's voice carried absolute authority. "This ends now." The fighting stopped. Loyal guards moved quickly to arrest the conspirators. Trell activated the hall's security systems, sealing the exits and recording everything for evidence. The battle was over. Jake helped Lisa to her feet, checking her for injuries through their bond. She was exhausted and bruised but alive. Around them, the hall was a disaster. Crystal pillars were cracked or shattered. Scorch marks covered the walls. Several people lay wounded, being tended by healers. But it was over. The queen looked at her daughter, then at Jake. "It seems we owe you our lives, Commander Morrison. Again." "Just doing my job, Your Majesty," Jake said tiredly.